Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's summer reading meeting. This is Barnaby Camp, the manager of GLS Atlanta, and we have a very special guest for us today. We have Ms. Ashley Quinn, the collections manager of the William P. Wall Museum of Natural History in Milledgeville, and she'll be talking about some of the um, paleontological resources here in Georgia. So, with no further ado, we'll let her begin.
Hello, thank you for inviting me for your talk this week. Um, uh, Mr. Barnaby, thanks for inviting me. I'm with the William P. Wall Museum of Natural History, which is at Georgia College in Milledgeville. And then I'm also the current president of the Paleontology Association of Georgia, which is a statewide association that welcomes all people, both professional and academics and enthusiasts, to learn about Georgia's paleontology. And so this this summer reading, this year's library summer reading theme has been Dig Up a Story. And the Paleontology Association of Georgia has been teaming up with our members to go around the state and do presentations about Georgia's fossils. And so hopefully I will be able to give everyone a good idea about the fossils that do occur in Georgia because we have quite a few. Most people um, don't even know that we actually have dinosaur fossils in Georgia as well. Um, so again, thank you, and let's begin our fossil journey through Georgia. Okay, and before we start, there's a few words, some vocabulary words, if you recall back to your days in school, that I want to make sure everyone understands as we're talking about paleontology and fossils. The word paleontology itself is the branch of science concerned with fossil animals and plants. So anytime you read the word ology on the end of a word, it usually means study or branch of science. And so paleontology studies the life that existed prior to and sometimes including the start of the Holocene epoch, and that is a time period that word describes a time period that includes the time period that we are currently living in. Fossil, the word fossil is the remains or impressions of a prehistoric organism, plant, or animal preserved in petrified form or as a mold or cast in rock. Most people, when you start talking about paleontology or fossils, they only think dinosaurs, dinosaurs, and dinosaurs are really cool, but there are other animals and plants that, many, many more animals and plants that can be preserved as fossils. Stratigraphy is the study of rock layers. In particular, we're looking at sedimentary rocks. There are three different rocks are typically categorized in three different categories. You have igneous rocks, which are made up of volcanic activity or magma production in the earth, and that magma or lava is cooled either fast or quickly, and those rocks become igneous rocks. You have metamorphic rocks, which are composed of the previous rocks that have been either squeezed with pressure or heat and changed into other rocks. That's why the word metamorphic is in that type word in that type of rocks there, meaning it's a changed type of rock. And then you have sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks is also previous types of rocks that have been broken down into tiny, tiny pieces, and then they are uh, they're turned into rock again from those tiny, tiny pieces. And so you have to have sedimentary rock in order to have fossils. So we need to look at strictly sedimentary rocks. And then we're going to also talk about geologic time. And geologic time is like a timeline. If you think about all the years of your life, you can probably recall certain things that happen at different times in your life or at certain types of years. Geologic time is the history of the Earth, and it stretches back many, many millions of years. So it's a very large interval of time that includes all of Earth and many millions of years. So those are the vocabulary words we want to keep in mind as we're going through our talk today. Um, Another thing, hopefully, you all have been able to encounter or touch or feel a map of Georgia and know what Georgia feels like, the shape of the state within the United States. I have a couple maps of Georgia that we are looking at. Let's see, hold on. Give me 1 second. Oh, no, this is not going. Okay, there we go. All right. Um, so I have a slide that has two maps of Georgia. One has it is the geologic map of Georgia. And if you could feel what that looks like on the screen, you would have a bunch of wavy lines all across the state. And on the map, they're all different colors. Those colors pertain to different types of rocks that you can find on the surface of the state. And so in the northwestern part of the state, where there's ridge and valley and mountains, you get a certain type of rock. And then in the Piedmont, the middle northern portion of the state, there's lots of metamorphic and igneous rocks. Not a whole lot of fossils are found in the Piedmont region of Georgia. And then below the fall line, which is the ancient seashore of Georgia, about 36 million years ago, you'll have the coastal plain. And the coastal plain stretches all the way from the middle part of Georgia. If you basically draw a line from Augusta to Macon to Columbus, any land below that is the coastal plain. And we have lots and lots of fossils in the coastal plain of Georgia. And so the two maps show one, the geology of Georgia, the different rocks that you can find in Georgia. And then the other one is the physiographic map of Georgia, in which Georgia's separated into those areas that I talked about, the Piedmont, the Ridge and Valley, the mountains, the coastal plain. And those are important areas to know when you're also looking for fossils in the state. Next, we have another couple maps of Georgia. One showing, both of them actually showing all the different counties that Georgia is divided up into. Georgia has 159 counties, and that's a lot of counties for one state. Our size, Georgia is kind of a big state, but still, that's a lot of counties for one state. And about a third of those counties have fossils have been found in them. And so one map has all the uh, counties of Georgia. The next map has counties highlighted in green or a different color to show which counties fossils have been found in so far. And that's about a third. Um, then we can talk about the geologic time scale and what North America and Georgia looks like on a map on the globe, if you could see the globe back in a particular time period. Um, for simplistic purposes, and so that we do not get lost in the weeds of geologic time, because there's many, many different time periods, we're just going to talk about the Paleozoic, which means the age of fishes, and that is a time period where most of the animal life that we have been able to find as paleontologists occurred they lived in the oceans at that time. That's the oldest time period, 252 million to 541 million years ago. Then we have the Mesozoic, which is the time of the reptiles, and that's when the dinosaurs ruled the planet. That time period stretches from 66 million to 252 million years ago. And then we have the Cenozoic, it's the time period in which we live in. That's the age of mammals, and that's where many of the giant mammals lived and also went extinct. Things like saber-toothed cats and mammoths and mastodons and giant ground sloths. That's those animals lived during the time of the Cenozoic. The Cenozoic is the most recent time period in geologic time. So the first geologic time scale slide or picture that we can see shows North America 450 million years ago. And if we're able to look at that map and what the United States looks like, Georgia is completely underwater except for a couple little islands out in the ocean. You had the growth of the Appalachian Mountains at that time, which you can see on the map, but North America itself is completely on the southern part of the globe, below the equator, and Georgia is completely covered by water. On the Mesozoic time scale, if we were to look back about 80 million years ago, we would see the shape of North America taking shape. We have the Rocky Mountains out in the west, and then we have a very shallow seaway, and then we have lots of land on the eastern portion east of the Mississippi River. Half of Georgia is still underwater at this time period, but we're getting closer to the equator and closer to where we are used to seeing North America on the surface of the Earth today. The next time period, the Cenozoic, if we look at the map 4 million years ago, very much more recent, we can see Georgia is completely on land now. No more Georgia underneath the ocean. We had a coastline that was further out, probably 50 to 200 miles out of where it is today. And then there's also a big sheet of ice that's covering part of North America down into Ohio and Illinois and Indiana. There, and all of Canada, there's this huge sheet of ice, and that was a glacier that covered much of the globe at that time. And so usually scientists and climatologists refer to that as the Ice Age. Okay, so if we're talking about fossils in Georgia, um, uh, we can talk about several different uh, areas in which you can find fossils. One, like I said before, was the very northwestern corner of the state in the Ridge and Valley section, Appalachian Mountains. There's 500 million-year-old fossils up there. They include things like trilobites, ferns, seashells, some animals called crinoids, and one giant dragonfly. So we have a picture of what the environment looks like during the Paleozoic era in Georgia. Lots of life underwater mostly. There were some plants on land, but the majority of life at that time, 500 million years ago in Georgia, was underwater. Um, the counties in which you can find Paleozoic fossils are Dade, Gordon, Chattooga, Catoosa, Murray, Whitfield, Floyd, Walker, and Polk counties. Um, if we looked at the Mesozoic time period in Georgia, 145 to 66 million year old fossils. They do include the few dinosaurs that we do have in Georgia, and all of those fossils occur right around the Columbus area. There is a triangle of sediments right around Columbus, in which you can find uh, animals such as Appalachiosaurus, which is a smaller relative of T. rex. You can find four species of Mosasaurus, which are marine reptiles, most closely related to Komodo dragons. We have one raptor species. We have a Lophorophodon, which is a duck-billed dinosaur species, and also a pteranodon species for sure. We also have a giant crocodile called Deinosuchus from Georgia, and it is about 3 or 4 times larger than the big alligators that we often think of living in South Georgia and Florida. The counties with Cretaceous fossils, with the Mesozoic fossils in Georgia are Stewart, Clay, Eccles, Chattahoochee, Quitman, and Crawford. Much younger fossils right along the fall line, which again is the ancient ocean shore in Georgia. It's about halfway through it. It runs about halfway through the state. We get 40 to 25 million year old fossils. And they include things like many species of early whales. Georgia is a hotspot for early whale evolution and fossils that remain of that evolution. We also have things like sand dollars, oysters, stingrays, sharks, sawfish. Um, and one in particular site that we have actually studied here at Georgia College is the Hardy Mine site in Wilkinson County, and there we find whales and sharks and sea turtles and sea snakes, but we also find a few land mammal fossils mixed in with those sea animals. So things like early types of rhinoceroses and even a rabbit tooth and possibly a saber-toothed cat tooth. And so that tells us that this environment a long, long time ago, even though we have all these marine species being preserved there, was also very close to shore because we're getting these shore animals washed in with the marine animals. The counties that have these fossils are Early, Wilkinson, Lee, Clay, Macon, Clinch, Sumter, Houston, Jenkins, Decatur, Washington, Jefferson, Crisp, Dougherty, Burke, Twiggs, Richmond, and Quitman counties. So you may hear the counties in which you live in these lists. So for much younger fossils, 20 million year old to 20,000 year old fossils, those all occur below the fall line into the coastal plain of Georgia. And that's where we get our megafauna, which are the mastodons and mammoths and giant ground sloths. Um, Lots of counties have these early fossils. There are also a few counties north of the fall line, one on the Piedmont, and several other that are in the caves of the Ridge and Valley system that have some Pleistocene fossils as well. Those really young fossils. The types of animals that we see at this time period, 20 million years old to 20,000 are things like giant tortoises, large bears, saber-toothed cats, giant beaver, lots of types of horses, giant bison, mammoths, mastodons. These are all the megafauna that lived during the late Cenozoic. The Georgia counties that have these fossils include Bartow, Chatham, Eccles, Glenn, Taylor, Wilkes, Burke, Coffee, Effingham, Liberty, Walker, Camden, Decatur, Floyd, Stewart, and Wayne counties. Just touching briefly on the evidence of whale evolution in Georgia's fossil record. Lots of uh, whale fossils, early whale fossils, probably from about 50 million to 45 million year old specimens come out of Egypt and other places on the planet. But we have a lot of these also in the southeast and in Georgia. And so whales are interesting animals. They're the largest animals that we know of on Earth, with the um, blue whales, I think, and the humpbacks being very large animals that live in the ocean. But they started off as little animals that kind of look like dogs. They had a tail, they had a long snout with teeth in them, and they also had a odd number of toes. sharks. Yeah. And so um and so they started out as these little animals with fur, and then they decided that they would go live in the ocean because there was more food in that area. And so, as they went to the ocean more to find their food, their bodies changed according to where they were living at. And so you'll see a change from the nostrils being at the very end of their nose, like you have your dog and cats, your pets, their um, little holes are at the very end of their face. And then as time goes on, as many millions of years pass, they lose their toes and their hands and feet become flippers. And then those nostrils migrate further and further up to the top of their skulls until they develop blowholes, which whales use today to breathe. And so we have like 4 or 5 different species of ancient whale in Georgia. There's a map there with about 14 different sites in which fossil sites in which we have found fossil whales in Georgia. I'm not going to read all of them, but a lot of them are right below the fall line. And then just briefly, we can talk about the 2 different Georgia fossil sites that have studied extensively here at the William P. Wall Museum of Natural History. The Hardy Mine, I mentioned that before. Um, that is a mine that exists in Wilkinson County. It's an old kaolin mine. So kaolin is a mineral that is mined out of the earth, and it's used in all kinds of things from makeup to paper making to making dishes. And there's a fossil layer that sits on top of the kaolin deposits sometimes in the kaolin mines. And so the mining companies will remove that layer of fossils, and we're able to go through and pick out the fossils sometimes if we're lucky. And we have found, again, many sharks, um, um, sawfish, sea turtles, sea snakes, lots of whales. But we also found an ancient rhinoceros tooth in with those fossils, along with some other land mammals, and that lets us know that environment there 36 million years ago was very close to shore because we're getting those land mammals washed in again with those marine animals. The other site, which I haven't really talked about yet, is all the way out towards the coast in the southern portion of Georgia near Brunswick. If anyone has been near Brunswick, it's in Glenn County. And there, a river, an old river, carves into an area where Columbian mammoth, which is a very large species of mammoth, and giant bison were buried a long, long time ago. And so we have huge fossils of these animals. We have a complete skull, just about a complete skull from a giant bison in our museum, along with some other bones from that animal and lots of Columbian mammoth bones as well. And that site is only about 50,000 years old, so it's very, very young for a fossil site there in Brunswick. A little bit about our museum. When we are open and the building is not being renovated, we are open from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. We are on the first floor of Hurdy Hall, which is on the Georgia College campus in the middle of Milledgeville. And we have multiple displays talking about different types of animals and fossils. There's also a planetarium on site as well. And so hopefully pretty soon when our museum opens back up in January of 2027, we'll be able to have visitors again. There are other uh, Georgia fossil resources that we can talk about. One I mentioned before, the Paleontology Association of Georgia. It is a nonprofit group of people. We get together sometime and go to field trips where we can find fossils or take pictures of fossils. We also have lots of traveling exhibits and events that we go to where we set up fossils so that people can interact with fossils face to face. And we've done many of those events throughout the years. But there are other places in Georgia where you can go and see fossils besides the museum that I work at, the William P. Wall Museum of Natural History. There's the Macon Museum of Arts and Sciences in Macon, Georgia. Thronatiska Heritage Center is in Albany. Skidaway Island Visitor and Interpreter Center is in Savannah or near Savannah. The Georgia Museum of Natural History is in Athens at Georgia University of Georgia. Um, the Georgia Southern Museum is in Statesboro. That's a fantastic museum. You have Fernbreak in Atlanta, and then you also have Telus Science Museum in Cartersville. If you've never been there, that is a fabulous museum as well. So those are some places in Georgia where you can go to centers and actually see fossils on display. And most all of them, I believe, talk about and focus on fossils of Georgia. There's a list of references which I will not read, but if anyone is interested in getting the resources that I used for this presentation, just let me know and I will not have a problem passing those on to you. Um, and that's about all. I am open for any questions. If anyone has any questions or if they're confused about anything that I said, please let me know and I'll try and answer those questions as best as possible.